Hi, Stacy. How are you?
Hey.
Hi, Emily. Emily, I'm going to make you host, and then you make me co-host.
Hello.
Hi, Jean. How are you?
All righty. Sounds like you had quite a month with a fire.
Yeah, it's just been, I'm really ready for 2020 to be over. I'm not going to.
Oh, everybody is. Everybody is.
So, and I just decided, it's crappy. I'm going to make it even crappier. Excuse the pun. Have my colonoscopy this week. Next week, my hernia taken care of. There you go.
Get her done.
If it's going to be crappy,
know how to live.
Make it crappy.
Wow. Yeah, see, I'm using COVID to postpone my colonoscopy.
Oh, really? No, I'm going to get it over with. All right, this lamp is coming out of my head, so it's got to go. All right. Our sign is having a hard time. It's towards the ends of its days. So how's the search for an ED going, Jean?
Well, they're still hemming and hawing about exactly what they need, as far as I know. Let me call Ann and make sure that she understands she has to go on. Oh, there she is. Hello.
Okay, so a couple quick questions before we get started and we start letting people in. So I will introduce everyone, right?
Yeah, can Ann share her screen?
She should be able to.
Okay. My goal is to keep track of questions that people ask, unless you wanted someone else doing that. But you know, I'm happy to do that or help someone do that and then ask them. So Ann's going to be making the presentation.
Okay. Yeah, and you just want them in the chat, correct?
Yeah.
You want their questions in the chat. Okay.
Can you hear me yet?
And when you want questions after a while, right? You don't want them as you go along.
That should work. I can't hear you. There.
Okay. Ann?
No.
Looks like she's having trouble.
There we go.
Okay. You want questions when you pause, not as you go along, right?
You feel free to break in if it's, do we think that most of the folks have heard this before, or is this new material for people?
I would assume it's new material for them.
Okay, well then let's not break it too much. Okay.
Yeah, then let's wait until you pause because you'll probably be answering stuff otherwise.
Right.
Right. So just so you know, at the top of your screen, top of my screen, Stacy Shine Stapleton. She is our American Sign Language interpreter.
Awesome.
Hello. She will be interpreting for us.
Great.
Emily is our communications director. And she will be streaming us to Facebook, and then afterwards she will be putting it onto YouTube so that we can link. What I will do after I introduce you, and what Emily and I will both do, is we're actually going to turn off our cameras because it makes it so that people, it's just easier for them to see the interpreter, quite frankly. What am I forgetting, Stacey? I feel like I'm forgetting something.
Are you going to do housekeeping, Heidi? Like turn cameras off? If you need the interpreter, I usually remind people to say you could pin.
Yeah, well, we're in a webinar, not a meeting. So they're not, they won't have their cameras on, period.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's fine.
Yeah, so this is more like we did. We only had, you know, the Destiny one that we did. We wanted that as a meeting so we could do breakout rooms. That was a little bit different. But this is, so it'll just be you and Jean.
Oh, okay.
Well, I'll turn off my video and mute myself too, so that, you know, until we get to questions.
Okay, so how we'll start though is I do want Jean, Ann, and Stacy on video at the beginning because I'll introduce everybody. And then at the end, you know, our call to action is that we want them to vote for the fair tax. And Emily, as you guys, if there's any links or anything that you are rattling off, one of the things is that Emily and I both can be putting that in the chat for everybody to come and look at.
Wonderful, wonderful.
We don't want to make sure we put our, you know, website on the chat, and let's make sure.
Yeah, and I'm gonna be Instagram and Facebook storying throughout it too, so I'll try to highlight anything that's major.
Yeah, so we'll start here in a couple of minutes. I'm not gonna say much at the top, but I do want to
And
make.
then Heidi, I'll give host back to you once I go live, because remember we found out that we could do that. So once it's live, I'll just give host right back to you.
Okay, not that I want to be host. So, okay.
All right, Heidi, I'm going to send you a document that has a lot of links for the chat box that you can use as you need to.
Okay, can you send it to both of us? elasky16@gmail.com.
ELASKY.
16@gmail.com. You impressed, Emily? I can just rattle off your email now. That tells you how
Okay, and then
I bother you.
And Heidi, I don't have in my
info.lwvah@gmail.com.
Okay. There you go. You don't have to put everything in, just as you see things relevant.
Yeah, but she'll also be going live on Instagram, the Instagram story,
Wow.
Facebook Live. I mean, let me tell you, Emily knows how to reach people.
Woo!
She's a
Excellent.
good person.
And so how many people do you have signed up?
Couldn't tell you to save my life. Not a ton. There were not a ton. It
Okay.
just didn't seem to, I mean, I sent it out to almost 1,000 people. So
Okay.
it's just not, I don't know. I think they have either just made up their mind or they're over.
Yeah, well, it's surprising because I would have thought, especially since the state just sent out that brochure, I would have thought, you know, people would have questions.
95 people responded to the event on Facebook, so.
Yeah, and usually Emily gets a lot more than that.
Hmm.
Okay, so we're almost at 7 o'clock. So we'll start letting people in. And hold on. Okay, are we ready?
I just made it broadcast.
All right. All right, so we've got our attendees coming in. Thank you so much. Welcome, welcome to the League of Women Voters of Arlington Heights, Mount Prospect, and Buffalo Grove for our event, our program on explaining the fair tax. We'll get started here in just a minute or two. It looks like we've got most of our registered attendees logging on. We are live on Facebook. Hello, Facebook. And we are excited to be here this September the 8th. I will do a shameless plug. Happy 84th birthday to my dad, Colonel Jerry Hoblet. You can Google him. He's pretty impressive. I won't lie. Anyway, that has nothing to do with the fair tax, but it is his birthday and I love him. Okay, Welcome. My name is Heidi Graham, and I am president of the League of Women Voters of Arlington Heights, Mount Prospect, Buffalo Grove, Elk Grove Village, Prospect Heights, and Wheeling. Essentially, we serve all of High School District 214, and we do quite a lot in the community, especially with the students of District 214, to encourage voting, to empower voters, and to defend democracy. So our main mission for 100 years has been to empower voters and to defend democracy. We are open to all genders, all gender identities, all ages, and all communities. You can find us on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, and you can also find us at www.lwvah.org for more information about all of the amazing programs that we do in our community. We have so many events coming up. And tonight I am excited to be bringing to you a program about the fair tax. So at the top of your November 3rd ballot is a chance to fix the state constitution to finally allow a graduated rate income tax. The League of Women Voters has been advocating for this particular item for 50 years. So we are excited to welcome a couple of people. Ann Coiter serves as the League of Women Voters of Illinois issue specialist for education and fiscal policy. She is on the steering committee of the Vote Yes for Fair Tax Ballot Committee. Her work as an attorney has focused on children's rights and state fiscal policy at the Shriver Center on Poverty Law, Voices for Illinois Children, Legal Assistance Foundation of Chicago, and the Collaboration for Early Childhood. So she's a little bit of a slacker. She was elected to 2 terms on the school board of Oak Park District 97, and she holds a JD from Yale, again, a slacker, and an MA in Social Sciences from the University of Chicago. We are very pleased to have you here today, Ann. Also with us is Jean Pierce, who I consider a friend. We served on the state board together, and Jean continues to serve on the state board as the Issues and Advocacy Co-Chair for the League of Women Voters of Illinois. The League, again, has advocated for this position for 50 years, and Jean has been working for the past 6 years on this particular effort. She has served with Ann as educational funding specialist, and Jean holds a PhD, so we really should be calling her Dr. Pierce, in educational psychology from Northwestern. Again, we just bring you one slacker after another here at the League of Women Voters. She's retired in 2008 after 34 years as a professor of educational psychology. So Jean, I would not imagine that you could have done 34 years as anything. Anyway, you don't look a day over 34. So I am very excited to have you here. Finally, and I will be going off of my particular camera because you're not here to listen to me or look at me, but we have Stacy Shine Stapleton. Many of you, if you've been to any of our past programs, you will recognize her as our American Sign Language interpreter. We are dedicated here at the League to be as inclusive as we possibly can. And Stacy has been instrumental in helping us bring our programs to a wider audience. So thank you so much, Stacy. And I'm going to now turn this right on over to Ann, and I will see you at the end of the program. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. I'm excited to be here with everybody tonight. I will get my slideshow going here, and here we go. Tonight, we will talk about what will be on the ballot in November. And I invite you to look at the bottom of your screen for the chat box and ask any questions you have as we go along. And Jean Pierce will help me answer them as the time seems appropriate as we go forward. So first of all, what will be on the ballot? You may get your ballot in the mail if you've asked for voting by mail as early as a couple weeks from now. You may see a separate piece of paper in that packet that you get, and that will have on it this constitutional amendment. Otherwise, if you go into the voting booth, it may be the first thing on the ballot. If it's not, make sure you look for it, because this is probably one of the most important things on your ballot this November. The General Assembly has passed an amendment to put this on your ballot, but you, the voters, get to decide whether it will go into effect or not. And what it is about is just changing the state constitution. It strikes out this sentence that says that the tax has to be on a non-graduated rate or a flat rate. It gets rid of that requirement and makes it possible for the legislature to impose taxes at different rates for different income levels, or they could stick with a flat tax rate if they chose to. They have at the same time, though, also passed a law that sets what the graduated rates will be if the provision passes in November, and that will go into effect on January 1st. This is the language on your screen that shows what will actually be on the ballot. It won't say fair tax. It just says that it will remove the portion of the Constitution that is sometimes referred to as the flat tax and makes it possible for income to be taxed at different rates. And you just check yes or no, and we hope that you will check yes. A flat tax sometimes, Pete, sounds fair, but it's really not as fair as it seems. The reason is because in addition to paying an income tax, families pay other taxes to state and local government as well. They pay property taxes, sales taxes, fees on things like cigarettes and liquor, and those taxes are quite regressive. They hit lower income folks a little bit harder than higher income people. And so when you take all of state and local taxes into consideration, it is, Illinois is one of the most regressive states in the country. We are the 8th most regressive state. The only way that a state can even out the regressivity of its other taxes is with the income tax, because there, unless you've got a flat tax provision in your constitution, which only 4 states have, if you have some flexibility in your constitution, you are able to tax higher income people at higher rates and lower income people at lower rates, and even out the regressivity of your system. And here's a chart that shows just how regressive the system is in Illinois. Your lowest income people here, the lowest 20% who earn less than $21,000 a year, they're paying 14.4% of their income in state and local taxes. Highest income people, the top 1% who make above $537,000, are paying half as much as a share of their income. And so the folks kind of in the middle there are still paying a higher share than the top earners, which isn't really fair, especially when you look at where the income growth has come over the last 30 years or so. You've got the top 1% of folks has seen rapid growth in their earnings, whereas the bottom 90% of us have seen very little growth. The income disparity between the top income folks and lower income folks is as high as it was during the Roaring 20s. And the black and white income gap in the US has persisted throughout this time, and it's even grown since the Great Recession. The relative wealth of households diverged even more than income, if you can believe that. And the gap is especially huge between white and black families today. The average white family with children has $1 of wealth for each penny of wealth held by the average black household with children. And the flat income tax that we have right now solidifies and keeps that unfair system in place. The income gains at the top dwarf those of low and middle income households, and yet they pay the same income tax rate in Illinois. And we hope to change that. One of the effects of having a flat rate income tax is that we don't have enough revenue. It's not only unfair, but it's inadequate. And what happens in Illinois especially is that the state has shirked its responsibility to pay for education. Generally, in most states, the state picks up about half of the tab for public education. And Illinois used to pay about half. But since we have not had adequate revenue growth, we have not had adequate ability to tap this increase in income at the top. So over time, the state has chosen to pay less and less of the share of public school education. So here is where the local share is in Illinois. Now it's up to 66% paid by local taxpayers, generally through property taxes. And then the state has shrunk down to about 27% instead of close to 50, where there should be. We are hoping that if we can get the fair income tax passed, the state will be able to make good on the promise it made in 2017 to put more money toward education funding, to make a fair and equitable funding system in Illinois so that local taxpayers don't pick up the tab, and kids who live in communities where the local taxpayers simply don't have the resources to pick up that tab, and they're getting really the short end of the stick on education funding. We hope that that will become equitable funding over time. The state will be able to put in the extra $350 million that they pledged to do in 2017 every year on top of the prior year. And we will see education funding equity in Illinois and lower property taxes for you in Arlington Heights and Buffalo Grove, and for me in Oak Park as well. Another way that we have been hurt by the lack of state funding is an attention to our environmental protection agencies. The Sierra Club of Illinois has signed on as a supporter of the fair tax, and they have pointed out what has happened to the head count in the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of Natural Resources as well. There just aren't enough people there to enforce the protections that we have. And in Illinois, pollution thrives on poverty as well. Towns and neighborhoods with lower average incomes deal with higher rates of air and water emissions. So if we can pass the fair tax and adequately fund our environmental protections, this will help everyone, but particularly low and middle income communities. So because of the budget cuts since 2000, we really cannot cut our way out of the crisis that we're in. We cannot afford any further cuts to education, as you've seen. We are also at the bottom for state reimbursement of mental health services, for senior services, for foster care. Our healthcare providers have struggled to serve patients. 40,000 low-income children have not received the child care they need. And we have lost 7,500 at higher education jobs. This chart from the Center on Tax and Budget Accountability shows how that has happened over both Democratic and Republican administrations. We've gone, if you look at this higher education line, we've gone from the nominal number of $2 million, excuse me, $2 billion, down in real dollars below that. There has been a 48% decrease in higher education funding. So we end up with fewer scholarships, with higher tuition, with less access to higher ed for our local students who end up going out of state. We have a brain drain in our state, and business and communities need those kids to be educated here in Illinois so that they can contribute to the growth and the future of our state. And you can see how the total net general fund service appropriations have declined by 20%. So cutting our way out of this problem is not the solution. We need more revenues. What we're asking for is not out of something crazy or unusual, because most states actually have a graduated rate tax system. In the majority of states, including the majority of our neighboring states, use a fair tax system. And as I mentioned, we're one of only 4 states that have a flat tax locked into our Constitution. A fair tax works for everybody. The legislature has passed a bill. At the same time they put this measure on the ballot, they let people know what kind of rates they are thinking about implementing if it passes. And with the rate schedule that they have put out there for your inspection and your, that you don't have to approve it, but you do have to know what they're up to. The rates that they have put forward mean that lower income earners pay a lower tax rate, higher income earners pay a higher tax rate, which is fair. And the way it's structured, 97% of Illinoisans will see no income tax increase. And a majority of middle and lower income families receive a tax cut. Only people making over $250,000 a year will pay more. And this includes small businesses who are being taxed on their profits through the individual tax returns of their owners. Again, 97% of those folks as well will not see a tax increase. And so this is how we arrive at an equitable solution for Illinois. Instead of paying, having the same rate across the board, we have a rate structure that works for everyone. This is the way that it will work. Currently, we're paying 4.95% across the board on everybody's entire income. With a marginal rate structure, you will pay 4.75%, a lower, slightly lower rate on the first $10,000 of income. Above that, for any additional income above $10,000, that additional amount will be taxed at 4.9%, up to $100,000. And then any income above $100,000 is finally taxed at the current rate of 4.95%. So you can see that people who earn up to $250,000 will end up paying less than they do today. Not a lot less, but some less. Above $250,000, the extra amount above $250,000 will be taxed at 7.75%. And then it breaks between single taxpayers and people filing jointly, so that people filing jointly up to $500,000 will be taxed at 7.75%. Then there's another bracket at 7.85%, and then the top bracket is at 7.99%. For people, single filers at $750,000, and that will apply to the entire amount of their income at that rate. And then for joint filers, the cutoff is $1 million. If you make above $1 million, you will pay 7.99% on your entire income. But that is only 0.3% of the population. So it's really a very small number of people who are doing very well. And these rates, these top rates, are lower still than in many other states. There's a couple of additional measures in this bill, and that expands the property tax credit that you get on your state taxes from 5% to 6%. And there's an additional new child tax credit of up to $100 per child. There is a calculator online that you can go and plug in your own income and answer a couple questions, and it will spit out how much you will save under the fair tax system, or if you make above $250,000, how much extra you will be paying. So you will know exactly what the story is. Our neighboring states are, as you can see, primarily graduated rate states. They have, there's a couple places where there are flat rates. Indiana, for example, where they have a flat rate tax at the state level, and they also have an additional tax at the county level for all counties but one in that state. We are likely to pay comparable rates to Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa. What has been proposed is not out of line with our neighbors. For example, in Wisconsin, 7.65% is the rate that applies at $259,000. And as you see, we have a rate of 7.99% that applies at $1 million. And in Iowa, you pay 8.53% beginning at only $74,000. So we are would still have lower rates than those neighbors. Other states have much higher top rates, including New York, New Jersey, District of Columbia. California has the top rate of 13.3%. So what has been proposed is in line and seems fairly reasonable. The fair tax will bring in $3 billion in additional funding to our communities. This will help to pay for education, for jobs programs, public safety, human services, and healthcare. The League of Women Voters, as Heidi mentioned, has been working on this for a really long time. I haven't been personally working on it for 50 years, but the League as an organization has. We are part of a nonpartisan ballot committee that is made up of a diverse coalition of organizations, including labor unions, community organizations, and community groups across Illinois. We recently had an event where 125 labor unions signed on to support the fair tax. There was an event around the 100th anniversary of women's right to vote, where 1,000 women signed on in support of the fair tax. So we are hosting lots of presentations like this and events, and hoping to directly engage voters and work through communities to see the fair tax reform finally a reality in Illinois. So the bar is a little bit high to approve this. We need a yes vote of more than 50% of those voting in the election, or we need a yes vote of more than 60% of those voting on the question. So a lot of people tend to skip over referendum questions. We hope that you will not do that. We hope that you will vote on the question and vote yes. This is how you can help. You can tell your friends and neighbors. You can write a letter to the editor. I saw in the Tribune today that they will be devoting more and more space to letters to the editor, so this is your chance to get published. You can host an event like this, or you can host an event that the Vote Yes for Fair Tax campaign can provide a speaker for. You can add a fair tax page to your League of Women Voters website for Arlington Heights. And you can also sign up as an individual endorser. Join those 1,000 women and and add your name to the list using this link, which I think Heidi will put up in the chat box. I wanted to also maybe pause here and see if there's questions.
Yes, we do have some questions. It turns out the chat is disabled, so folks are using the Q&A. So the first one that came in probably is one that a lot of people have, that if this is passed, will it allow the legislature to tax Social Security income and pension income?
Oh, that's a great question. Illinois is one of 3 states that does not tax those sources of income in retirement. We do not tax Social Security. We do not tax 401k distributions. We do not tax pensions. And after the fair tax passes, that will still be true. There is nothing in the fair tax that will allow retirement income to be taxed. And in fact, the fair tax is supported by the AARP, the American Association of Retired Persons, because they believe that the pressure to add a tax to retirement income will be somewhat eased if the flat tax is bringing in additional revenue. Okay.
Okay. The next one is kind of a two-parter. What's to prevent higher taxes being imposed on middle income if the super rich leave? So let's deal first of all with, are the super rich likely to leave?
You know, a lot of people think that makes sense. They think if I were a super rich person, I would leave. But in fact, research shows that wealthy people do not leave based on what income tax rates are in states. They may leave because of jobs. They may leave because of high property taxes, but income tax rates are not the reason, shown by research, that people will leave a state. So we do not think that this is a danger, that this change to the fair tax will cause an exodus of wealthy folks. In fact, some migration studies recently completed by the Center on Tax and Budget Accountability show that low and middle income people are more likely to leave if services are not being provided, if education is not well funded, if human services are not being provided. People will leave to find better funded states. So that piece of the question, I think the answer is wealthy people will not be leaving the state.
So there are a number of questions dealing with, isn't this opening the door to raising taxes on everyone? What will prevent them from increasing rates on middle income? And there have been a number of different ways of asking that same question.
Okay, yeah, that's another common fear. But in fact, the legislature can raise your taxes today. They could raise the taxes on middle income, on low income folks, and they have in the past. And if they need additional sources of revenue, they may do that again in the future, using a flat tax rate where everybody would be paying higher taxes. If with a graduated rate tax, they have more flexibility to raise taxes on those who have the ability to pay. As I showed with the chart earlier on where where incomes have increased over time, that increase is in the very top bracket of taxpayers. And that is where the legislature is likely now and in the future to target increases, to go where money is available and the relative impact of that additional tax will be less. To raise taxes on middle income folks is always a really hard vote for legislators to take. They are extremely reluctant to take that hard vote to raise your taxes, and that won't change with a graduated rate income tax either. That would still be a very tough vote to take. To say that the graduated rate income tax will lead to higher taxes on the middle class is fear mongering and speculation. There's no reason to think that it's any more likely than it would be today.
So another question is, you're comparing income tax rates to our neighboring states. How does this compare when other taxes are included, especially property tax and sales tax?
Illinois has high property taxes. There's no question about that. And I think that's universally acknowledged. And there is a commission that has been set up by the legislature to try to address that. It's a very complex problem, but I want to say universal, but I won't. But I'd say that the consensus among many people is that with more revenue from a graduated rate income tax, that will relieve property tax pressures. And so that is one piece of the solution to the high property taxes. Sales tax is another area where our sales tax rates are high, but we also tax fewer categories of things that can be taxed. Many states tax services that Illinois does not tax. So when you look at just the rate for our sales tax, it looks high, but if you take into account everything that you're buying, the picture shifts a little bit. And our income tax rate currently is, pretty low for the high income folks who would be paying a much higher rate in other states. And for low and middle income people, it's kind of middle of the road.
So several people, especially on Facebook, have raised the issue of, well, can we really trust our politicians to spend the funds carefully and appropriately? Shouldn't we demand that some of the systemic issues like the pension crisis be addressed first?
The League of Women Voters absolutely agrees that there are many issues and problems with our state government that need to be addressed, including re-amortizing the pensions, looking at consolidation of governmental entities. The list is long, things that the League is working on. But we also believe that we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can make our tax system fairer and also work on these other issues that do need to be addressed. Holding the fair tax hostage in order to get consolidation is really counterproductive. We need to move forward with fair and adequate tax revenue with or without these additional reforms. And that is the issue that's on the ballot in November. It's the thing that we can make happen today, and we can keep working on all of these other issues, and we will.
So, yeah, one concern is that, well, it's only going to raise $3 billion with the rates that have been proposed. And so they're going to need to keep raising taxes every year. And once again, why not vote this down until we can elect trustworthy politicians?
Well, if we don't pass it this year, then the hole will be even bigger next year and the year after that. We need the revenue to come in as soon as possible to start climbing out. If we have concerns about how trustworthy our politicians are, there's a solution for that at the ballot box. You can elect people that you do trust. That's how democracy works. That's our recourse for folks that we don't trust. But I would say that we have a pretty good sense of where the money will go. Governor Pritzker, when he proposed his budget in January, he put forth two budgets, one with the fair tax and one without the fair tax. So you can see where the additional money would be dedicated. A big chunk of that is for the education funding that was promised in the 2017 legislation. They don't have a lot of discretion in where the money goes from the general funds. It goes for education, human services, public safety, and healthcare. And those needs are very real. The money will go to pay for nurses and for teachers and for public safety workers, and those are needs that will still be there and growing with or without the fair tax. So we do hope that this additional revenue can come in to help us get out of the hole that we are in. It's true that $3 billion is not going to solve all of our problems. Actually, before the pandemic, the revenue estimate was closer to $3.6 billion. Now it's closer to $3 billion. But as the economy recovers, as we come out of the pandemic, that revenue will hopefully continue to also increase. And over time, we will be able to make good on our commitments, pay our past due bills, and make investments in under-resourced communities and in areas where we absolutely need to put the funds so that we have a better state. And you, the citizen, have an important role to play in making your desires known to your legislature about where that money needs to go. We sometimes say that after November 3rd, the real work begins. You need to get in touch with your legislator right away and let them know where you want that additional revenue spent.
We do have one question for Heidi. Will they have access to the PowerPoint after the presentation?
I would be happy to send it.
Thank you. That answers your question.
I was going to suggest that we let people ask their questions live, but actually this is a webinar. So I guess if you believe that your question has not yet been answered, then please do retype it in the Q&A or re-ask it on Facebook.
Yeah. Well, while you're thinking about that, I just want to put in a little plug for getting additional judges for the election. High school juniors and seniors can make, I think, $200 for the day.
Yes.
And these are the requirements for that. It's a great introduction to democracy and the way our civic system works. We hope that you can recruit some folks who are young, and especially as many folks are staying away because of the COVID concerns. So, are there any additional questions?
Not that I'm seeing.
Okay. This is a rare opportunity to really change the structure of our government for the better. And I hope that those of you who are ready to support the fair tax will get out there and spread the word. A lot of people still aren't aware that this is even on the ballot. So go to yesforfairtax.org, get additional materials, sign up as an endorser, and we will hopefully be able to celebrate together as soon as the votes are finally counted.
Two more questions came in. One is, are corporate tax rates affected by the proposed amendment?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. Yes, they are. Currently, the corporate tax rate is a flat 7%. It will go up to 7.99% with the fair tax legislation. So yes, the corporate taxes will be affected.
Another question is, what or who are the groups funding ads pro and con? It's a diverse, the primary funder, I guess, of the pro would be Governor Pritzker. But there are a number of, as Ann mentioned, a number of different types of groups that are supporting it, whether faith-based or human services and so on and so forth. Regarding the con, much of the funding is coming through the Illinois Policy Institute, which is funded by former Governor Rauner, the Koch brother, who was the fellow that just signed on recently,
Yeah, Ken Griffin has put money into one of the ballot committees for the opposition. I think IPI is not a formal ballot committee. They've just been publishing a lot of opposition misinformation, I would say. The Illinois Farm Bureau, the Illinois Manufacturers Association, Illinois Chamber of Commerce have put money into the opposing ballot committees.
one of the questions is to list some of the negatives. I think actually we've our question askers have hit on most of the negatives. I'm not sure that there are any that we typically hear that haven't come up.
There's people leaving the state if they're wealthy. The idea that you can't trust people to spend the money well. Yeah, those are the primary opposition arguments. A lot of the arguments are really strike me as being assuming the worst in the future. There's absolutely no reason to think that taxes on the middle class will be raised going forward under the fair tax any more than they are today. There's fear mongering about taxing retirement income, when in fact we think that taxing retirement income is less likely with the fair tax. So I just say, look at who the messengers are for these opposition arguments, and ask yourself whether they are based on fact or fear.
One of the questions is reiterating one that you addressed about comparing income tax rates to neighboring states, but how does this compare when other state taxes are included, especially property tax and sales tax? So let me take a stab at that, and maybe answering it from a different perspective might help. That with the money raised through the fair tax, when the state gets more revenue, then the state can put more revenue towards education. And that means that this will free up the local municipalities from needing to have such exorbitantly high property taxes. Now, this isn't going to happen in 1 year or two, but it certainly isn't going to happen at all unless the state gets more revenue. So the first step is for the state to get more revenue through the fair tax, and then we have the possibility of seeing property taxes eased up. Now, another question on sales taxes compared to other states. The states around us are much more likely to tax services. Illinois very much under taxes services. We tax utilities, but that's about it. Whereas the surrounding states do tax services, and some would argue that this is more of a service economy, and so they do have higher taxes in that way.
The other thing to remember is that this income tax increase will only affect people who make more than $250,000 a year, and that's only 3% of the population. The increase is just on the increment above $250,000. So if you make $300,000, you'll pay extra on only $50,000 of that. So the actual tax increase burden is really not going to hit most folks at all. So when you're worried about the total tax package, this will not affect the taxes paid tomorrow by 97% of the population.
Okay, one question is, will wealthy people spend money to find loopholes in the tax code? What ensures there are no loopholes?
Well, it's just a straight income tax. So it's based on the federal income tax that people pay, and that will continue to be the case for both corporations and small businesses and wealthy individuals. So if there are tax loopholes to be found, they have already found them. This won't create any opportunity for new ones. So there are not so many loopholes that there is not still substantial revenue able to be found with this kind of income tax.
One person was thinking that the lowest tax bracket would go down to 0. Yeah, I'm not sure if you can go back to that slide, but no, the first $10,000 that you make would be taxed at a lower rate, but it is still higher than 0. There we go.
Okay. Yeah. We do have a refundable earned income tax credit in Illinois. Not all states have that. So that if you are working, but you are earning a relatively low amount of money, you are entitled to a federal income tax credit, and the state also gives you, I think it's 17% of that credit off your state income taxes. And if you owe less than the amount of the credit, you get a check back from the state. So you're actually paying a negative income tax. You're getting money back from the state. We also have an exemption per person. Not every state has that. I think it's $2,750 per person, $2,750. So that exemption is taken before this marginal rate is applied to your income. So if you have a family of 4, your income tax bracket is going to be in this lower rate. It won't be 0, but by the time you apply the earned income tax credit, it will be close to 0 or even getting some money back.
And also, I'm not sure if you mentioned the tax credit for children that if you have for each child under 17, you get $100 back if you're making less than $100,000.
Right, and that credit is not refundable, unlike the earned income tax credit, but it still adds up. So that will also reduce the tax burden for the lowest income tax payers.
One of the questions, what guarantee do we have that the $3 billion will go back to local municipalities?
Well, some of it will, because there is a provision in Illinois that local, unlike Indiana, you can't have a local or a county income tax. Instead, the state collects the money and then they shift some of the money back to local governments based on a formula that they have. So a portion of the income taxes that are paid in do get returned to local and county government. So as the amount of the total revenue from the income tax goes up, so too will the amount of money that local and county governments get back from the state go up somewhat. It's written into the statute. That's how you know it's going to happen.
There was I'm not sure that we talked very much about small businesses. So there's a question about what's the concern for businesses leaving Illinois due to the increase in taxes and revenue, or that they might just pass the charges on to the consumer and increased prices. So yeah, perhaps if you can address that again.
So basically, small business taxes are paid by the owner of the business through their individual income tax return. So your mom and pop store on the corner, sole proprietorships, subchapter S corporations, partnerships, law firm partnerships. Those all pay taxes through the individual income tax returns of the owners of the business. And so the fair tax rates will apply to those folks just like they do to people earning a salary. If the revenue profit, the profit from that business is below $250,000. And that is the case for the vast majority of small businesses in the state, including farms, small mom and pop shops. Those folks will not see any tax increase under the fair tax proposal.
Let me reiterate what Ann said. It's the profit that they're paying on. It's not the total amount, that they only pay taxes on the profit, and for most of them, the profit for the individual taxpayer business owner is under $250,000. Someone was asking, how are the brackets changed? The legislature is the one that has the power over setting the rates and fixing the brackets. And
they're different in every state. Every state does it a little bit differently. And if Illinois needs to fine tune it going forward, then the legislators will hear from you and ask you what you think, and then they can make changes as needed. But it was a pretty hard fought battle to get to this compromise in the first place, and it's going to be really tough to change it going forward, I think, to come up with the votes that they need to actually get this through the legislature and then get it signed by the governor. That's a pretty tall order for any changes in income taxes.
so I believe that is all of them.
So this is really a pretty awesome opportunity that we have here to make a better state going forward. This will mean additional revenue. We can finally get rid of the structural deficit that we've labored under for decades. And it gives me great hope. I hope it gives you hope as well that we will see a state that is fiscally stable, that pays its bills on time, that provides the services needed in a fair and equitable way to all of the residents of our state. We'll end on a high note.
Thank you so much for joining us, Ann and Jean. We really appreciate it. As many of you know, the League of Women Voters is dedicated to educating voters. You can't vote if you don't know what you're voting for. So regardless of how you end up casting your ballot on November 3rd, I do want to encourage you all to go to our website at www.lwvah.org, and there you will find all the information you need to get your mail-in ballot, to find out where to drop off your ballot, to vote in person and early, all the things you need to know to be safe this election cycle. Remember that Ann talked about students being election judges. This year it is a holiday. So I have a senior in high school, so I'm encouraging him to go ahead and use that time better than on his video games. And we have very many events coming up in the near future. On September the 17th, we've got Election 2020, the top 10 things you need to know. On the 20th, the 21st, and the 26th, we have candidates forums for all of the elections that you'll find on your ballot. We have National Voter Registration Day on September 22nd, where we will be registering voters in person, but safely and distanced, at the Arlington Heights Memorial Library, as well as the Mount Prospect Public Library. The League of Women Voters of Illinois, our annual luncheon. I was the chair of that program for the last 2 years, so I know just how much work goes into it. Erin Roper is putting on an amazing virtual luncheon. That is September the 24th. And for all of this information, you can find more on our website or on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We even have a youth account on Instagram, student.lwvah, and we have a mascot too, actually, 2 rescued greyhounds vote almost every day for something at Pause for Vote on Instagram. So everything you need to know to be engaged and informed, and you can always join us at www.lwv-AH. So thank you so much for coming, and have a great and wonderful and safe evening.